Shalom, everyone, to the second class of Intro to Judaism. Today we're going to look at sacred texts, something of our mystical tradition, and what is the Jewish view of the soul. So I thought that would be an interesting bunch of topics that were on the list that you gave last week of things you're interested in. Let's jump right in. Where's that? So, how did the teachings that we received in the Torah develop into the later commentaries and interpretations? Well, this is a review for some. It might be new for others of you. And as I said, we have a very wide range in this class. So just take what's interesting to you, and we can always look further at another time. We have the 5 books of the Torah: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They have Hebrew names that are different. And what are some of the topics that you learn from the Torah? Well, about creation, then the patriarchs and matriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, getting down to the Joseph story, which brings us into Egypt, out of which we come through Moses, the Exodus out of slavery to the wilderness, where God gives the gift of Torah at Mount Sinai, and all the children of Israel are camped there at the foot of the mountain. There's the story of the golden calf, and the tikkun, the repair and healing for that, is building the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert. And we're about to enter the promised land after 40 years. That brings us actually to the end of Numbers. Deuteronomy is a kind of retelling of much of that. And that's where the Torah ends. What happens when we get to the end of Deuteronomy? We roll the Torah back to Genesis. Now, if you want to get into the land, then you have to go into the rest of the Hebrew Bible, which is called the Tanakh: Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. Torah is those first 5 books from creation up to entering the land. Nevi'im means prophets. That's where you walk into the land, literally, with Joshua. The tribes settle in the land. We come to the time of Judges. Then the people ask to have kings. Some were good, some were bad. And at the same time, we have prophets: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and 12 minor prophets that are not minor. It's just that we have less of their writings so that they're shorter, and they're called the 12 minor prophets. The third section of the Hebrew Bible is Ketuvim, writings. And that includes Psalms, Job, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, or Kohelet, the Song of Songs, Esther, which we just read at Purim, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Chronicles, which is a kind of historical replay of some of the things that we read in Kings. And it ends right around the time of the Maccabees. But before that, it's the rededication of the Second Temple. And to get to the Maccabees, we would have to get into the Apocrypha, the hidden texts, which I'm not going to go into today, but there are other, or called the Chitzonim, the outside books. But this is the Hebrew Bible. We don't call it the Old Testament, because that would mean that there's a New Testament, and the Christians call Old Testament because they have a New Testament. For us, the Hebrew Bible is complete. Now, what happened after the time of the Bible? We had to figure out how to apply the rules and laws and mitzvot handed down very cryptically and very generally in the Torah. And so it gave rise to the Mishnah, a compilation of the oral law, and the Gemara, which is commentary on the Mishnah. Together, these two become the Talmud. And each page looks like this. It has one little part that's the Mishnah, that's the ruling, and then all of this is commentary throughout generations of rabbis, and they kept being printed more and more and more. So the Mishnah set forth categories of laws and how to observe them. And the Gemara provided the rabbi's discussion and a lot of argument and some stories, and further set prayers and application of the laws in the times. Combination of law, that's halacha, customs. This is how we do it. This is how they do it in Israel. This is how they do it in Babylonia. This is what we saw out in the community. So they describe them. Also, some of the history, lots of folklore, lots of agadah, which is stories. And that all together is the Talmud. So, for instance, if it says, don't light fire during Shabbat, the Talmud would say, well, you can light, you should light candles 18 minutes before sunset, and after that, don't light lights. But if you light it before, then it can give light during Shabbat. And then they'll have something about how to apply the law, because it doesn't say specifically how to do it. So the Talmud gave us a lot of the blessings, like candle lighting on Friday night, things about Hanukkah, all kinds of things that are not in the Torah we get from the Talmud. So that brought me to the blessing for this week. Every week I give you a blessing. Last week was Shehechianu, when you do something new or you want to mark a moment. And this is the Torah blessing. Every Thursday we give a blessing before we study Torah. It's a mitzvah to study Torah. So I'm going to say it slowly, and you can follow along either the Hebrew, the transliteration, and then we'll say the English. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. There's the word Torah. Holy One of blessing, your presence fills creation. You have given us opportunities of holiness. You could say sanctified us with your mitzvot, and commanded us to busy ourselves, to to be involved with the study of Torah. After which someone else says amen. You don't say amen to your own blessing, you say it to someone else's. So let's say it again. You're all muted, so you can just say it along with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Good one to learn. I'll also, before the class is over, not today, but before the whole series, I'll teach you the Aliyah blessing. Before and after the Torah is not just studied, but chanted in the synagogue in a kind of pageantry part of the service. I see some more people joined us, and I'm welcoming you. I see Shay found us, and Lindsay. Good, very good. I was worried. So glad to see you. So how do you apply ancient laws to modern situations? We've got electricity. We have surrogate births. We have machines that people can be tied to at the end of life. How do you make a decision that's a Jewish decision, but based on the Talmud, which will be based on the Torah? Well, this is what happened. After the 42 volumes of the Talmud were finished, they were reorganized in about the 12th century into the Mishnah Torah by Maimonides, Rambam. And that was organized into certain categories, leaving out the stories, leaving out the discussions, just bottom line, what's the rule? Then that was further codified into 4 volumes of the Shulchan Aruch, which means the set table, by Joseph Caro in the 16th century. So there was always this sense of, what did they mean? Let's give some commentary. Wait a minute, it's too much. Let's simplify. Like an accordion. Comment, simplify, back and forth throughout our history. And this is mostly about the rules and laws. How do you kosher for Passover? Who's considered Jewish if you adopt a child, and how do you decide? And just so many questions, especially now since we have all this modern technology, and yet it goes back to the Shulchan Aruch, to the Mishnah Torah, to the Talmud, to the Torah. So those are called responsa. And letters were written all through the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and the modern era, up to this very day, to decide matters based on earlier laws. But they had to apply to our issues. if you can't light a fire, can you turn on a switch? Well, Orthodox would say no, because it creates a spark which creates light. So they unscrew the bulb in the refrigerator, so when you open the refrigerator on Shabbat, the light doesn't go on. Things like that. More liberal Judaism says, yes, you can, because it's not exactly like making a fire, and we've come to different response, different decisions. What about end of life? Well, based on stories in the Talmud, if someone is suffering, you're not allowed to cause an end to life, but you can take away an impediment. And it's based on an interesting story in the Talmud. So they always look for precedent. This is why there's so many Jewish lawyers. What's the precedent for this that we can apply in this case? What about surrogacy? What about abortion? So many responsa, and they're fascinating. And there's a book called Tough Choices, which gives you what would you do in this situation? And then it shows Jewish responsa to those questions. So I have seen times where a chaplain, a Jewish chaplain, is called into the hospital, or a rabbi is asked, what do we do in this case? And a decision is made not lightly. A decision is made based on the mitzvot and how they could be applied today. Now, we have a whole other set of texts that are mystical. They're not about rules and laws. They're about the universe, about the soul, about God, about how do we understand the mystery of life? But it was only taught to those who were already learned. In other words, they were grounded, because it was kind of dangerous if you are meditating and you could reunify with the soul soup, which means you flip out and you're not grounded anymore, and you might just go crazy. And there are stories about 4 who entered paradise. In other words, they went into this meditative state. Only one came out whole. That was Rabbi Akiba. So I always say you need to be grounded. Now, it used to be you had to be a male, married, and 40. Well, how about female and very grounded, and never mind the age? We can handle it. Okay. So Jewish mysticism is known as Kabbalah, which means the receiving. And part of it was written in the Zohar, and I'll show you some other texts. And a very well-known teaching you may have heard of is Ein Sof, means without an end. That's one of the names of God, just unending, all expansive God field. And the 10 Sefirot, the energy centers, starting from the crown, Keter, down to Malchut, which is the groundedness, and having balanced sides. I've taught a course in Kabbalah. This is certainly not going to be expansive today, but just to say that if you know about chakras, that's the center line, the center column, and the sides and the pathways give you the pathway from, let's say, God to earth, from the idea to the manifestation, from the yearning to actual physical space and objects. So if you want to build a house, you go through this. If you want to make a baby, you go through this. This is how God created the world. It just means from very ethereal to very concrete. And the balancing is interesting, sort of like the flow and the stopping, or the loving kindness and the discipline and the boundaries. Do you see what I'm saying? That it goes from right to left. And then the center is always the combination of the two extremes or the two sides. And there's a whole lot we could talk about. There's a whole psychology of listening carefully to where a person is out of balance and asking them to meditate on the opposite side of the tree of life. This is called the tree of life. It's basically a kind of dynamic pathway from, I would say, heaven to earth. I could say it many, many ways. Now, where do we find these mystical teachings? One is the Sefer Yetzirah. Yotzer means to form. So it's a book of formation, and it explores the spiritual domain. It's really interesting. It tells you more about the Sefirot, those energy centers, and about souls and about angels. And it's very dense, very difficult to understand, but it's pretty ancient, like from 200 of this era. The very first that really is the revelation at Sinai. I mean, the first giving of the Ten Commandments, whoosh, amazing energy in all the languages. And the story is that everyone heard it at the level they could take it in. So that's the original mystical teaching. But the Zohar, which was published in the 13th century, but attributed by Moshe de Leon, as if it had been written by Shimon Bar Yochai back 100 CE. They figured if I attribute it to somebody in the very, very beginning, at the sort of even earlier than the Talmud, the very beginnings of the Mishnah and the Talmud, people will listen to it more. But it's really beautiful, and it has a discussion of the nature of God, the origin of the universe, what are souls made of, and how do they move around, and what do they do? Sin, redemption, good, evil. I mean, it's just got everything in there. And it really is a commentary on each of the Torah portions, but way removed from the story, much more metaphorical. I picked one quote. In the beginning, when the will of the king began to take effect, he impressed his signs into the heavenly sphere. So this is the beginning of creation by God. Within the most hidden, the infinite, Ein Sof, a dark flame issued forth. How can a flame be dark? This is the kind of language. Like a fog forming on the unformed. Forming the concentric ring of that first sphere, this flame was not white, not black, not red, not green, no color. Only after this flame began to assume size and dimension did it produce radiant colors. And from the innermost center of the flame gushed forth a host of colors which spread on everything beneath. Concealed within all was the hidden mystery of the infinite. So you can tell this language is not simple, and it talks about the way the original light from God was spread to the earth. And later Kabbalah will talk about the breaking of the vessels because the light was so strong that it had to be withdrawn, and it only came back on the fourth day of creation with sun and moon and stars. So this is something that could take a whole lifetime of study. The Sefer HaBahir is also medieval. Bahir means light, so it's brightness or illumination. And it talks a lot about the divine feminine, about that other aspect. We often think of God because language in Hebrew is so gendered. A lot of it is masculine. Here it's very feminine. And about the reincarnation. Yes, Judaism believes in the Gilgul HaNefashot, the moving of the soul into new generations. And a lot about the alphabet. Each letter is sort of taken apart and given a story, and it's a building block of creation. So the letters are not just sounds, they're actually holy entities. Many of you have heard of Isaac Luria, the Ari, the lion, and he took the mystical traditions and explained them in a way that are mostly what we study today, like making space for creation. That's called Tzimtzum. You can imagine if God takes up everything there is, there's no room for creation. So God had to do Tzimtzum. God had to contract to make room for the world. We talked about the shattering of the vessels, Shavirat HaKelim, and how there are hidden sparks from this early creation. And how do we repair? By releasing the sparks through our deeds. That's a tikkun, that's a repair. If any of these words are new for you, just let that sink in another time. But for those of you who've taken a few courses, this is a good review. So when we do a mitzvah, we say, "Blessed are you, God, who commanded us to light the candles," or "Thank you, God, for this food," or "Thank you, God, for seeing beautiful flowering trees." So whatever we do, we're releasing the sparks by recognizing the God source about it. So I'm going to stop for a second before I go on to really spending time on our soul. I'm going to stop the share and just see what touches you from this very, very quick look at how the two strands of our text developed through history, law and rules, and mystical teachings toward the soul and understanding of creation. So that was a lot. Reactions, questions. You can unmute and just raise your hand. Yes, Madeline.
On reincarnation, that's very interesting to me that Judaism believes in reincarnation. I didn't know that. Do they believe that there are steps that lead to, enlightenment, like the traditional reincarnation
Possibly, that
theories?
there are lessons to be learned and there's purification of the soul, and the soul after death goes to a space of being purified, and then after a certain time it is ready to move up as a master. But nobody's ever gone there and come back, so often the bottom line is, and we don't know, and we don't know, so therefore pay attention to this world. They'll say, even an evil soul can be purified, it just might take longer. And since we believe our parents were all good, that's why we do the unveiling at 11 months and not 12 months, because we say it takes a year. So we try to say, oh, well, it only needs 11 months. And so we do an unveiling of the burial place at less than a year. It's a sweet tradition. And we truly don't spend a lot on it, and it developed through the ages. It's not in the Bible. It developed more and more and more through the Middle Ages and onward, through, I would say, our people understood that there seemed to be old souls that were more advanced. And they also would say, oh, well, this character is really a reincarnation of Elijah, or this is a reincarnation of an old enemy, or they would say there's a certain pattern that we see here building on something earlier. That's about all I can say about that, because I haven't been there and I haven't come back, so I can't exactly tell you. So pay attention to this world. But they do speak about Olam Haba, the next world, the world to come, and how we can bring that about. And part of it is doing the mitzvot and studying and being kind to each other here on earth, and not putting all your eggs in the future basket. So they say, if you study and if you do good things, if you help the bride and you honor your parents and you come to pray and study and you accompany the dead and you do all of these wonderful mitzvahs, you get the interest as a reward, but the principle is in the world to come. It's sweet. It's like putting it in the mitzvah bank. Yes, Steve, I'll unmute you. Go ahead.
What did you mean by accompany the dead? What does that mean?
So that's when you prepare a body for death, and you come to the mourners, and you help with the burial, and you bring food, and you do all the mourning rituals that give honor to the person who has died, and you give solace and comfort to the mourners. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Nancy.
Remember that you're supposed to be accompanied when you die. You're supposed to be accompanied with someone the entire time, and there's special people who volunteer to do. That's probably not a job a lot of people would.
It's magnificent. It's called shomrim, and it's harder these days because if the body is in a funeral home, they close up shop, and you can't sit there accompanying the dead. You can't be a guardian between the death and the purification and the burial, but you can. There are other ways you can do it. We sometimes do 2-hour sessions while the place is open, and then after that, kind of remotely focusing and doing the best we can. And that's Chevra Kadisha, and it's time we did another training. I did one a few years ago, but it's time we did that again.
How long does that generally take, that whole process?
I'm sorry?
How long does that process usually take? the sitting,
Well, you're
the
supposed to,
accompanying.
a body in Jewish tradition is supposed to be buried within a day. We can't always do that now because we live so far away. And so that's a larger conversation for Jewish views of the afterlife and customs of burial, which we can do in another time. And there's also green burial. There's a lot to discuss, but just know that we honor the body that was the vessel for the soul because it did contain the soul. And therefore, there are many, many customs that show the respect. And when I prepare a body with I always speak aloud in the room there, and I say we come with great respect to prepare you for your journey, and we don't mean any disrespect, and it's very modest. You keep the body covered. So there's a lot of customs that are psychologically very sound and very comforting. Nancy.
I also was interested in this, that when you mention all the books and how the information was developed and prepared for us, it starts out being very strict and rules and laws, and only evolves to mysticism. And
Well, they grew up at the same time.
oh
Yeah, ancient times there was mystical, and many of the rabbis were mystics who were talking about the rules and laws. Same time.
okay, because I was thinking, that it's interesting because a lot of people seem to come to Judaism through Kabbalah, which is at the end of the which is
No, they really grew up at the same time. From the earliest times, there were always people meditating, and then the prayer book was more or less formed, and that part of it was mystical meditation besides the fixed prayer. And all of these rabbis knew both. They knew the halacha and they knew the
Zohar.
ways, well, not only Zohar, but they knew ways to connect. And a mitzvah is a way to connect in a different way. But those two strands were side by side. Yes, Shay.
You were talking about sort of the soul and care accompanying people from death into what comes after. I was wondering if there's any mysticism or traditions, beliefs around being born, the start of life, not just the end of life.
Oh, they're lovely stories in the Talmud, actually, about how 40 days before a baby is born, an angel visits in the womb of the mother and teaches the baby all of Torah. And then right before they're about to be born, touches here, which is why we have that little mark here above our lips, and the baby forgets, and you spend the rest of your life trying to relearn it, which is why when you learn something that really makes sense, it's as if you knew it. It rings true to you. Lovely story. Yes. Any other
Thank you.
comments or questions about the way the Torah is kept alive and not seen as only an ancient book for then? Do you really get how it's being applied and how it was always studied in layers of relevance all the way up to our own day? So in the Torah, for instance, you read about the Exodus, but in the Talmud, you have all these rules and laws, and they set down the Seder to commemorate the Exodus and what foods you have and what blessings you give, and it turned into the Haggadah that we use today. And now today there are many, many Haggadot and with different illustrations and all that, but that is one more layer that was developed because we wanted to commemorate it. We wanted to taste our history, feel our history, move, dance our history, sing our history. It's a very full-bodied, multi-sensory experience. And it's also midor lador. It's also very generational. It's not hidden away. There's some religions where the mysteries are hidden. Here it's teach your children. And you will open on that day telling your child this is what we did when we came out of Egypt. And then that's why they have the 4 questions, and that's why they go hunt for the Afikomen. All of that was developed very early, you know, between the first 2 centuries of the Common Era. So think of it as ever flowering, unfolding teaching to have us connect body and soul with our roots. And the Torah is on sticks that are called trees of life, Atzei Chaim. And every time we read it, it says, Nata b'tochenu chaye olam. It planted within us eternal life. That's one of the second blessing after the reading. And I always have that sense every time we read it, or especially if a child is coming up, or bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, that we've just put another leaf on the tree of life, on the tree of Torah that's ever unfolding. I love that expression. Lisa, I see your hand is up.
Wait, oh, okay, you unmuted me. I was just going to ask something about the soul that you were talking about and the reincarnation, because I'll never forget when my daughter and I were at my mother's bedside as she was passing, and she said the most amazing things, you know, like she said, I'm walking down this long corridor and there are these bright, beautiful rooms on both sides, but it's really long, you know, hard to get there. And she kept repeating that. And then she said things like, they're asking me questions and I don't know the answers. Can somebody help me? And like I told my rabbi back in Pennsylvania about that, and he was astounded, because he said the rabbis have been talking about that for hundreds of years, that when you're dying, your soul goes to the gates of heaven and the angels ask you questions. And I swear my mother was there. And so like, and she passed it, she said it. So it's kind of like I'm always, well, I hope she got in. And what does that mean? Do you have to know certain things for your soul to get into heaven? And does your soul
We don't believe in heaven and hell. There's just Olam Haba. There's the next world. There's Sheol, which is like the dank, dark place where the body goes, but the soul yearns to return to its source, capital S. Whoa, I just really felt something when I said that. Whew. So the soul yearns. I'm always amazed at this material that it's just not study, it's like talking to your gut. And so for some it takes longer, or they need to learn more, and there are books about levels of soul that have more mastery and teach the other souls. Yeah, that's all I can say right now. Yes, Nancy.
Helps, but it made me feel a lot better when I read it yesterday about we can't make up for all of our sins, but we can think about the good things that we do, you know, like the good things that we do. And when Lisa was talking about questions, the rabbi was saying that when you ask questions about, well, you know, you did this, you know, you got in front of the line here, you know, you could say, but you have to always think about, okay, what can I do that, you know, when you're asked those questions, that you could say, you know, I wanted to just know that you may be mad at me because of the other thing I did, but I also, you know, made dinner for this one, you know.
Oh, that works. That works. Tell about all the tzedakah. I mean, the soul is weighed, and it's like there's this universal video. It's all there. Did you ever see Meryl Streep in Defending Your Life? She watches the video of her life. It's a great movie. Not a Jewish movie, but very interesting. She looks at her past lives. But I was thinking of this prose door, this long hall, and I once studied that life is like a long hall with windows in it. At the end of the hall is where you end your life, but Shabbat is like the windows where you get a glimpse of the world to come. Kind of nice image? So you sort of peak and then it goes back to another 6 days. You keep walking and then you peak again. And because on Shabbat, you don't have needs and wants, you just be. You're in gratitude. You're saying, I have, not I need and I want. So just think of that long. Lisa, thank you for that beautiful image about your mother, because I really believe that this life is a waiting hall for the palace that's waiting. And we have to enjoy the garden we're in while we're here and make use of all the gifts that God has given us and not to be ascetic. We don't have an ascetic tradition. It doesn't mean that you can't be like a Nazir, to say, like Samson and like others who chose it. He didn't choose, but to say, I am withdrawing from certain pleasures for a limited amount of time. But that's not a big tradition in Judaism. You're supposed to enjoy. You're supposed to have a sip of wine symbolizing joy and fullness. You're supposed to enjoy a pomegranate with its 613 seeds. You're supposed to give a blessing and enjoy and raise the sparks, back to the sparks, to elevate whatever you're doing in your life to a holy level, not like an animal, but like a person, not just, I'm hungry, boff, but, oh, what a blessing, how beautiful, blessed is this food, and then you eat. Madeline.
I found what Lisa said about her mother's passing very interesting, because I can remember before I was born. And yes, and it was very, very real. And it was darkness and almost like an eternity of time. And I knew I existed. I actually had like those words in my head, I exist and waiting for the light to come. And I waited and waited and waited and waited. And eventually the light, did come. But I remember that. And I remember telling, my mother about it. And of course, nobody believed me, but it was very, very real. And I'm certain that's what it was.
I'm so glad you
So,
remembered that. Most children lose that knowing early on. So what a blessing that you can remember it. There's a
oh
lot of
yeah.
background noise in your place, so I'm going to have to mute you.
Yeah.
There we go. So let's talk more about the soul and a few very basic things that I want to make sure that we differentiate between a Jewish notion of the soul and other religions. So in our mystical teaching, the soul is pure. Every morning we say, Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehora hi. The soul that you have given me is pure. You have given it to me, you'll take it away in the time to come, and you'll restore it to me at some other time. That's in the morning blessings every single day. We read that we are responsible for our own sins and that sincere repentance returns the soul to its pure state. I always talk about the copper bowls that my father gave my mother 70 some years ago, and that they get tarnished. And on Rosh Hashanah, I have a special cleanser and I clean them up and they shine again. And it's like that with our soul. Through our actions and our sincerity and repair, we go back to the original soul. So we believe that the soul in its pure form is pure in its original form. And there are various levels from a basic aliveness to a spiritual connection to all. And we're going to spend a lot of time on the levels of the soul. And we also believe there's some kind of afterlife with varying beliefs in reincarnation. Different denominations of Judaism and different years and different rabbis will tell you different things, but it's definitely there. All right, so we're going to have a video now about the 5 levels of the soul.
There are 5 aspects to the soul. There are 5 levels to the soul. there is the level of nefesh. Nefesh is the animated part. That's the part that breathes. It's the part that wakes up in the morning. It's the eye that goes to work. It's the eye that eats, that breathes, that sleeps. It's the eye of everyday consciousness. It's the eye. It is the lowest in a sense, but also in some ways the greatest vessel for the revelation of the divine. It is the feminine amongst the aspects because it's the totality. It's that which breathes. It's the, anima. You don't breathe, you don't live. So breathing is very much a part of the totality, and nefesh is the idea of breathing. Nefisha is breathing. Above that is the level of ruach. Ruach is the spiritual, but the lower levels of the spiritual, I would say. That is what characterizes your personality more individually. So it's personality. Plenty of people are breathing and eating and walking around. So nefesh, a lot of people's nefesh is very similar. But once we get to the level of ruach, we're starting to distinguish between emotional qualities that express themselves through personality and, for example, when you go to a function, like you go to a wedding, and people say, oh, how was that, a Jewish wedding or a Jewish event? And people say, oh, how was that event? They say, oh, it was great, it had a great ruach. That's because ruach is that spiritual energy that can come into the world through the way that people express themselves individually. Still part of a totality, but starting to express a little bit more of the I in between. And the level above that is the level of neshama. Now, what we're trying to do, what most people want to try and achieve in a spiritual life is a constant revelation of ruach, so that they don't fall back constantly on just basic animal existence, but that they express something of that which is fundamentally human. As Nietzsche after would have said, human or true human. I mean, that is the ruach. And in relation to the nefesh, the ruach is a singularity to the totality of the nefesh. And what we try on occasion to reveal is the level above ruach, which is the level of neshama. And neshama is your uniquely spiritual self, your enlightened self, your self of fully realized meaning, because it is ultimately meaning and consciously realized meaning that you are trying to put out into the world. Your interactions with the world should produce meaning. So the great righteous and holy people of the world are able to reveal neshama, and they're able to reveal the level of soul that we call neshama. And there are two levels above that, one of which never comes into the world. The highest level, which is the Yechidah, which is the singularity. It's called Yechidah, which means singularity. You don't need to go any further than the realization of the highest level of soul is Yechidah to realize that that's what the essential of a person is, and is never revealed. It is the part that emanates energy to all the other levels of soul, but it never comes into the world, it never gets revealed. One person in every few generations, or all of us by some remote form of aspiration, may get to reveal the level of chaya, which is above neshama. But that's already rare. If we focus on the three levels, so our nefesh is here incomplete, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't be alive. Our ruach ascends and descends into us periodically, Neshama doesn't really move, but we try and reveal it. Well, we try and bring it down, and then you've got the two levels above that. So, in fact, Kabbalah has extensive discussions of the soul, but they're all summarizable by saying I. And I can't say I about anyone except me. But we've got to recognize that within the structure of I, there are different levels. Emotionally, psychologically, physically, and we attempt to reveal the soul as much as possible. That's what it means to be an authentic human being, in fact.
Right, so let's look at those 5 levels of soul. Nefesh, that's your aliveness, the awareness of your physical body in the world. Nefesh. Ruach, as he spoke about, is spirit, personality, emotions, artistic expression that is beautiful and enlivening. Above that, neshama, uniquely spiritual self, enlightened, fully realized. Then there's this gap because this is above what we can relate to or bring down while we're alive. Chaya, which is a template of the original soul, merging into a state of no ego or separateness, hard for us to imagine. And way up is Yechida, singularity. That's that soul energy. It's the essence of the soul bound to the Holy One. Maybe you could call it the soul soup, so to speak. Now, the reason I added this beautiful illustration is because we are literally created in the image of God. Yud, He, Vav, He, the 4-letter name of God that's unpronounceable, but it shows in our head, shoulders, arms, spine, hips, and legs. And so we are walking fractals of the divine. And from the Yud, from that little hook at the very top, that's the God spark. A Yud is the smallest letter, and it's the God spark of the divine, which is brought down to earth through the upper He and the lower He, which are considered feminine energies, through the spine, which is another male energy, to the Yud He Vav He, which when we come across it in the Torah, we say Adonai, we say Lord. So we say the title and not the name, because the name is too powerful and unknown, and therefore so essential that we simply recognize it, but we say Lord or Adonai or God, we say some other word, but this is really the name of God right here, Yud He Vav He, and it is imprinted upon our very bones. And in Hebrew, bone and essence is the same word, etzem. So it's in your very bones as you walk through the world, and you're manifesting from the very highest God spark of yearning for creation down to the feet as you walk in the world as a physical being with needs and a body. We stop there for a moment, take a breath. That was about 2 years of study in about half an hour. So let's have some questions. I'm telling you, this is a helicopter view just to find out what interests you and so that we can figure out what other courses to do in the future. But I wanted you to understand why this mystical teaching came about. Because of the yearning, you can't just study and say, how do I light candles? You want to say, oh, I'm meditating on the light and I see something of the universe. Do you see that? That there's this yearning for the connection to the mystery. And there are various meditations that the ancient rabbis did that we still do today, if you're grounded. Merkava, the chariot, and all kinds of ascensions. But you have to be able to come down, back down to community. You come down to the from the mountain. You're not supposed to stay up there. You're supposed to gather the treasures and bring them back. Which is why I'm so thrilled that we'll have this wonderful class on the Kabbalah and Wizard of Oz, because if there ever was a journey where you get the treasures and you bring them back home, that was one of the archetypal stories. That'll be in May. Yes, Diane.
Okay, so there are 5 levels, and do we go from level to level? How do we know what level we're at? Do we, one day we're at one level, one day we're at another? How does that work?
Well, your chi, your energy changes all the time. And we know in Sedona, we talk about our auras. So sometimes you're just at the level of needing to eat and sleep and get dressed and take care of the laundry. You know, it's your nefesh. It's awareness of the physical body. Now, ruach is where you get into the zone and you create this great painting, or you author a book or compose a song or rock a baby and feel connected, and it's just a little higher, but you don't stay in one state for long, and you go back and forth, and you have different manifestations of yourself at all times. The neshama is, let's say you've been on a retreat for a week and part of it was silence and part of it you cried and you felt connected to the all and you just knew that you were good, you know, something like that. You're in a moment of neshama. Now, neshama is also, neshima is breathing. So a lot of these, ruach means wind, and linshof is to breathe out. So a lot of these have words that have to do with different manifestations of the breath. In our meditation on Wednesdays, we do a lot of breath work. What does it mean to breathe in? What does it mean to breathe out? What does it mean to receive from above? What does it mean to receive from below? What does it mean to activate all the energy centers as you're breathing? I mean, there are so many techniques to this. So any label and any model is only a label and only a model. The truth is your life. Yes, Madeline.
Okay, thank you.
A dream that can be a manifestation?
Now we can hear you. Say it again, please.
Do you believe that, like, when you have really creative dreams, like sometimes I create paintings and music and all these things in my dreams, can that be a manifestation? Or are dreams something?
Dreams are considered 1/60th of prophecy, according to the Talmud.
Are what?
1/60th of prophecy. So dreams you're supposed to take seriously. And in the Orthodox prayer book at the back, it has a whole section on, it's called amelioration of dreams. You're supposed to take a significant dream, and you know when you have a dream, capital D, and you go to 3 friends or 3 people, and you say in Aramaic, or you could say it in English, I have dreamed a dream. And they say back to you, this dream you have dreamed is a good dream. This dream you have dreamed is a good dream. And they say that 3 times, and you're supposed to tell your dream, and you're supposed to take it seriously and have it be, and you're supposed to interpret it. So the idea of dream work is very much a part of our tradition.
Right.
Soul, levels of soul, incorporating God's spirit within you and recognizing that spark in others. Is this something that you have known, have felt, are surprised by? Tell me your reactions to this, especially if you haven't studied it before. Raise your hand. Anne? I unmuted you.
Oh, thank you. I couldn't find that. I was looking for the little hand. So thank you for reading that. So the Ruha, you just circling back to Ruha, does it mean, I know you said it means wind, but does it also mean divine wind, like an embodied?
Ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim, and the spirit of God hovered above the face of the deep. So all of this is about creation. It all goes back to creation. God yearned for there to be something other than the Holy One, and moved back, did Tzimtzum, created a void so there could be creation. And then we read the creation myth or story, or however you want to understand that. We do the same thing. Let's say you want to build a house. So first comes a yearning, and then comes the idea, and then comes the blueprint, then comes the materials, and then you put them together, and then you decorate and move in. It's the same kind of flow, but it all starts from a yearning for there to be. Let there be, and there was. So it's all this. We are creative in the way humans can be creative, but we create from something. It's called yesh mi yesh, something from something. God created yesh mi ayin, something from nothing. There was nothing, and God created, and that's the big mystery.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Other reactions? Lisa, I unmuted you.
I just have another question about the soul. So if we're created in God's image and God created the universe and everything in it, including people, from nothing, and you said our souls want to go back to the soul soup, quote soup. So are our souls basically like a little piece of God, but we're disassociated from God? I mean, we're created in God's image, but if the souls want to be reunited with God, were our souls part of God? You know what I'm trying to say?
I think you said it beautifully. I would just
Yeah.
say yes. We're a fractal. We're a chip off the old block. You know, we are part of the whole, and that's why we really need to look at all of humanity and all of the universe and the earth and all of that as being part of our big I, our big selves, and not to ruin or kill or diminish any other part of it. It's all part of us, but we feel distant. We live in the world of duality. Now, if I take from one of our mystical books and I talk about the alphabet, what's the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet?
Aleph.
Aleph. Aleph, if you deconstruct it, is made of a vav and two yuds. There's a one part, and then there's the two little parts, right? And that's, each letter has a numerical amount. Vav is 6, and yud is 10. 10, 10, 6, 26, and 26 is the number of the name of God, of Yud He Vav He. So there's a connection between Aleph and creation, the first block of creation. Forgive me, I'm going to have to just take a moment here. Hi, I'm teaching. Can you leave me a message, please? Bye. Okay. And we don't know what happened at the beginning. We don't know Aleph, which is why the Torah begins with what letter? Bereshit bara Elohim. What's the letter? Bet. Second, we come in duality. We don't come in at unity. Unity was only God, the Aleph, and we come in at the Bet. And Bet has its back turned to Aleph because it can't see to Aleph, and it's facing outward to the rest of the alphabet and the rest of creation and the rest of our lives.
But can a person feel that, like, God wants everyone's soul to be reunited with God? Like, that's something
that's supposed to happen in prayer, that you feel when you get to the Amidah that you're standing and having a conversation, getting closer. You're like climbing up the mountain, and I would say Shekhinah, the indwelling presence of God, which we think of as in kind of a feminine form, yearns for us to, he said, Machazir Shechinato L'Tzion, and we pray for Shekhinah to be reconnected, to return to Zion. There's always a yearning for completeness. So on Shabbat, it's a time of unification of that kind of completeness, heaven and earth, male and female, or loving partners. Everything is vibrating in a higher way because of that devekut. Devekut means cleaving. And in meditation, you can get there for maybe a second. And the minute you say, I'm there, you're out.
Thank you. You really just made things a little clearer to me. Thank you.
It cannot be made clear or else it's bogus. So whatever I said was just approaching an arrow, but it wasn't the destination. I want to make it clear. Yes, Madeline. Where are you? There you are. Let me unmute you because you're having a little trouble with that. Okay, go.
Do you believe that we always existed and have a destiny? Or were we created after, say, the creation? Did
Can
we,
you turn
did,
off
did
whatever's
our
on in
souls?
your house? There's a TV or something on that we can.
Yeah, I know. My husband's got the TV on.
I see. Okay, then I'll mute you. We learn that all the souls that have ever been come and are still and will be, that energy isn't lost. So the Kabbalists knew what the physicists are just catching up with now. And every time there's a new mathematical formula or the physicists come up with some new string theory, I go, yeah, the Kabbalists knew that 2,000 years ago. That the vibration of the universe is the Ratz V'Shov, the going and coming. And as you get more and more into Kabbalistic teaching, you get that they intuited something of the pattern of the universe, which perhaps includes the existence of the soul. So it is taught that we were at Sinai in the souls that were there, and we received Torah personally. And I think that's a very comforting thought. And I'll, whether it's metaphorical or it's energetic, it's part of our belief system, which again links us to a wider sense of community. It links our soul to a greater purpose. And a lot of Hasidic stories about how we don't know what our soul purpose is, and we spend our whole life doing good deeds because we don't know which one is the one. And it could be that it was for one day when we helped an old lady with her groceries, and it could be one day when we helped an orphan get shoes, and it could be one day when we taught something to a child and boosted their self-esteem. We just don't know. But there is a soul purpose, and everyone is unique, which is why I personally feel very strongly about counseling people who are suicidal, because to remind them that they have a purpose and that their absence will be felt, that we're like the letters of the alphabet or the letters of the Torah, and any letter that is missing, that Torah is no longer able to be read. It is not complete. And so it is with all the souls on earth. This discussion is the discussion, and it's impossible. We can't come to any true conclusions, but what we can do is feel the light go on and go, yes, that feels right. Yes, that rings true. Yes, that fills me. And that's all we can do. Diane and then Carol.
You said something about how with reincarnation, that the souls eventually go up to the source. If the souls finally reach the source, they don't reincarnate anymore. What happens to them?
Well, maybe there are levels, and I'm not a Hindu. They have much more developed ideas about the Gilgula Nefashot, the rotating of souls in various levels and to become masters. But there is progression, I think, of purification. And maybe there's a flow and coming and down. We're like a wave in the ocean. We're distinct for a moment, but we're part of the whole. And the wave is something, you can measure it, but then it sinks back. I'm gonna have to say, please leave me a message, I'm teaching, thank you. Oh, okay, Carol.
So I just want to share that I find it really comforting that the soul still exists of my parents, because I rely on them still. I ask for their help still. I believe that and not just for me, but for others. And I've felt like they have helped. And this conversation helps me understand why. You know, I've always believed it. I mean,
we can ask for intercession by the souls of those departed who loved us, to send good energy and protect. My mother, through the Holocaust, believed that her mother protected her. She could feel it. And there was no reason why she survived. I mean, if you read my book, From Miracle to Miracle, A Story of Survival, you'll see she faced death so many times, and it's so unlikely that she survived, but she felt her mother's energy. Now, when we say Kaddish, it's one of the things that happens, we believe, is that the soul for whom we're saying Kaddish rises to a higher level. And that's why it's such a great mitzvah. That's why please come Wednesday morning to Minyan. Sometimes we don't have a full Minyan, sometimes we do, but then we can't say Kaddish. We need to do that in community to support each other. And it's one of the beautiful teachings in Judaism. Let's come together as a community, support each other as we are elevating the souls of those who are departed. So much to think about, so much to feel. Janet.
I have a comment on that, but I will not. So there was as an alternative unto Melech HaOlam, I thought there was
Ruach HaOlam.
Yeah, but then now it doesn't seem high enough.
Spirit of the world. Rucha at Shekhinah Ruach HaOlam. Well, we wanted to make a feminine version of the Torah blessing. And Ruach is the creative energy that hovered across the deep before everything was separated. So that's pretty high when you think of God's Ruach, maybe our Ruach.
Okay, so a God, okay, an infinite Ruach versus just my second level of soul.
Right, and who's to say that that second level isn't very high? If you ever were with an author or a composer or a great dancer or anybody who is in any of the arts, they've got Ruach. And there's something about an artist that can translate an idea into a new creation. That's what Bezalel, the first artist, did. And he was considered in the shadow of God, Bezalel, and he was the one who helped Moses figure out how to create the ark and the whole Mishkan, the whole tabernacle. So it's pretty high. Yes, Nancy.
Last week about how most people they could just they see two dimensions, but when you have that, what Bezalel had, this I guess it's neshama, they could see across the world. And you explained that to me, and I loved that explanation so much. That was really great. And I think that that's what it is. It's almost like the world is flat, but with this, you could see it many dimensions.
That's lovely. I got to say, Nancy, very often when you quote me in such a deep level that I know I never said that. You took it to another place, and I want to start quoting you because it's much better than anything I could have said.
Oh, so silly. But I think about that. You could look at the world as being flat, but then there's this other vision where there's
and not only 3 dimensions, there's 4 and more. Who knows? And sometimes we grok that. Sometimes we just grasp it, and then we try to hold on to it, and then it's gone. I'm
And
sure
then
we all have moments of that.
and at that moment you're late, everybody's screaming at you, it's everything becomes a big mess, so you have to gracefully get out of that.
Or you just come back to regular duality and, you know, get the clothes out of the dryer, you know. Yeah.
Or hope the pot didn't burn.
So we have to have this balance, because back at the early days of the century of the millennium, Shimon Bar Yochai went into the cave because he was under penalty of death for the Romans, because he kept teaching Torah and you weren't allowed to at the time. And the story is that he went into the cave with his son for like 13 years. And when he came out, he was so afire with God understanding that everything he looked at got burnt. And he also had no compassion. What are these people doing? Plowing a field? What are these people doing? He was like judging everything from such a high level that God said, the bat called, the sound came, the heavenly voice said, go back to the cave, you're not ready. And he had to go back for another year. When he came out, he could be a little softer. So we need to soften our judgment with our chesed, which is what we ask God to do, like especially at the High Holy Days, that pure justice can't rule the world. Nobody would pass muster. Nothing's perfect. So we have to constantly be in this balance, this holy tension of the flow and the stopping. So chesed is outpouring of love. But if you have too much of an outpouring, you have a flood. So the water has to be stopped at a certain point. The fire warms you and lets you cook. Too much and you've burnt the house down. So everything has to have a balance. If you have uncontrolled love, you could get to incest. Do you see what I'm saying? That everything has to be in a balance so that it's moral and so that it's somewhere in the range of what's appropriate now for this case. That's where all the rules and laws come in, that one has to be on the precedent of an earlier one. And when the rabbis disagreed, there were a lot of disagreements in the Talmud, in other words, they had different ideas of how to carry out the mitzvah, the compassionate side is the ruling that we go by, the school of Hillel. And that's a good lesson. You have to have gevura, you have to have limits, you have to say no to a toddler. You have to say, don't touch that outlet, you know, you'll get zapped. And sometimes you have to slap the hand if they're getting too close to the pot. But you have to control your anger so that you're definite and you're protective, but all within a compassionate tempering and vessel. So every word I'm saying is only approximate. Every model and every listing I'm showing you is only approximate. It's only in your own deep meditation that you'll reach a purity of knowing, da'at. That's the third eye space right here. It's the invisible sephirah, the invisible energy center that they sometimes show with a dotted line, because every model is only a model. So I see it so many times. Sometimes they show it as concentric rings. Sometimes they show it as top to bottom. Sometimes they show it as just the pathways, different colors. It's all good, and none of it's the ultimate. So we never actually reach our total destination. We're constantly going down that long corridor, just peeking out the window here and there. I'll never forget what Lisa said about her mother. And ultimately, the question they ask, according to the Talmud, of course, they say, we don't know, but we think that the first question is, were you fair in your weights and measures? In other words, were you a cheat or were you good to other people? And not how many times did you go to the synagogue? But that's a question that, is a good one too. Put it on the list. So does this spark something in you that either is very comforting or disturbing or unsettling? I'd like to know where this is landing, because this is a lot of very concentrated stuff. This is not this is not the form in which you could actually use it. This is the concentrate. Yes, Nancy, hold on,
Yeah.
hold on. Let me unmute you. Yes.
It's for me, it's very confusing. I've seen, I see all these books and I try and remember, okay, there's the Torah and then there's the Tanakh. What's in the Tanakh? I can't remember. I feel very comfortable reading the Torah, the Parsha every week. I'm really good. I want to expand, but when we learned about the Mishnah, I knew that was going to be a biggie. And then there's all these other ones, and I really love prophets, but I can't really remember where that fits in. But all of this stuff, I find that when I'm first hit with it, I can't remember everything. I don't really understand what you're talking about. And then like, I'll get it. I'll get this. I'll remember that, then, and then it starts weaving together. So I think it's very good to be a receptacle. I think I'm trying, nefesh, they said that's when you're the level that's like a vessel. Like I feel very vessel-y right now, I just want to take it in. And then during the week, I'll try and rock it.
Right. So this is just letting it wash over you. There's no quiz at the end of this of where does the book of Ezekiel fit in the Hebrew Bible. No, you have to do this in many layers, like mica. Have you ever seen a rock mica? Each level is completely transparent, or at least translucent, and it builds up and builds up and builds up until it's solid rock. Here, I have an example. And the reason I love this rock, you see, it's very solid and heavy, but each facet is just one little layer. So when I was a little girl, my father, Alfred Fleissig of blessed memory, used to take me on walks, starting at the Jewish Community Center across the street, and there was some mica there, and we would peel off one little piece, and we would deposit it in this little niche inside a railroad tie. It just was there, and I would deposit it, and then we would have a very lovely walk and talk. And our relationship was like that, level after level after level with my father. And I thought, relationships are like that. And I said that the very first sermon that I gave here. And when I was installed as the rabbi of this community, they gave me this rock and say, may our relationship develop like this rock, layer by layer by layer. And that's how you learn too. The first time I heard this, I couldn't take it all in, but I've been doing this for like over 30 years now. And I remember the first time I heard of the four worlds, those layers of action, emotion, mental activity, and spirit. I mean, I just couldn't take it in. And now it's the lens through which I see the world. So just allow, don't push, just let it float over you. Lisa.
A simple question. When a Jewish person, let's say you have to go to court or and you have to put your hand on a Bible, or let's say you're getting elected, right? And
you can bring a Hebrew Bible.
A Hebrew Bible. So if you would bring a Hebrew Bible, it would be the Tanakh, right? Because that's
Correct.
everything.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to ask that.
Yeah, Torah is just the first 5 books. Then you have Nevi'im and Ketuvim. You have the prophets and the writings. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? A lot of stuff. Diane.
The only thing I'm confused about is in that reincarnation that you come to Earth because you are to learn something. Everything that happens to us is a learning experience. And when we don't learn it, we reincarnate maybe with the same people in different situations. But once we get to that highest level of the source that you talked about, Do we stay with the source and just never reincarnate again? Do we turn into angels? What happens once, if a soul ever gets to the source? Because I did meet somebody one time who said, I was with somebody that Steve knew, that person, and he said, well, now I'm at the highest level I could be, and I am going to the source. Well, what happens when he's at the source? I mean, is he just, you never reincarnate again?
I can't possibly answer that question. I think that the souls are, in a way, an angelic presence. Some of us have seen them, felt them, been
Oh,
visited by them, and there are masters and different levels of angels. I've read a lot of books about it, and again, they don't know either. But through dream and through all kinds of like past life regression, they've come with some understanding. And I don't know if there's an ultimate going back to the very, very, very source, to the Aleph, or if it's just a sort of general energy field from which particular waves come back as souls into a body. It's wonderful to think about it, but I would say try to perfect your soul purpose while you're alive, and don't worry too much about that, because it can tie you in knots rather than enliven and elevate your understanding of your place in the universe. That's what I will say.
okay.
A couple of
All
last
right.
comments. Nancy, back to you, and then Madeline.
You said don't get too specific. I wanted to find there were 5 levels, and I think I heard what they said about the 5 levels of the soul, but the last one was Chaya, and I think Chaya is an animal.
Chaya and Yechida. He said it out of order. Here, I'll
Yeah.
share that again.
Okay, it seemed like Yechida was lower than Chaya.
No, Chaya is a template of the original soul, like original man, Adama Kadmon, sometimes they say. But Yechida, like Adonai Echad, it comes from one. And that's the infinite soul soup up here, I think. So he said it, but he said it quickly, and he talked about Yechida before he talked about Chaya, but he said that Chaya is under Yechida. So these are this is the understood levels of the soul, with Yechida being whoosh, the all.
But is this in the continuum with Nefesh is number 1, the feminine, the anima, the vessel, the aliveness? Is this the same?
Yes.
But so where does the Chaya fit? At the
Just
end?
like this. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, big gap. This can be reached in our world. Above that, Chaya, Yechida. This is where the angels are. This is where the soul comes from, up here. Okay? Any other slides you want repeated? I'll be happy to do that in our closing moments. And if not, I will show you where we're going to go next week. We are going to go into the cycle of sacred seasons, and we'll focus on Passover as the template of a journey from oppression to freedom, from tightness to openness. So that's the holy times and seasons is one aspect of how we grasp the holiness, not just of our particular history, but of the archetypes of joy and sorrow and all the different roles that we play. The cycle of seasons replicates the time of a person's life as well. So that's what we have to look forward to next week. Then we'll take a break during Passover, and I want everybody to be able to attend some kind of Passover, and then we'll talk about that when we meet again for the last class, which will be April 25th. Yes. So we're taking a big break because of other lectures and Passover and other things that will take our attention. So may the source of all souls infuse each of our souls with a sense of aliveness and purpose, joy, creativity, and the knowledge that we have a purpose to be here on earth at this time, in this body, in this configuration, and that our time is well spent enjoying this world and bringing our specific gifts and tools and treasures to others. Give me an amen. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great class. Thank you.